I grew up in a house that gleamed with ambition. Picture a colonial-style home in Darien, Connecticut, all white clapboard and black shutters, with a lawn so perfect it could have been in a magazine. My family wasn't just successful, they were the kind of people others pointed to as the gold standard. My mom, Clara Harper, taught literature at Yale, her lectures so famous that students fought to get in. My dad, Henry, was a historian whose books on the American Revolution sat on every professor's shelf. Then there was my brother, Nathan, 4 years older, the golden boy who seemed born to carry the family torch. By the time he was 16, he was debating at national competitions, his trophies lining the living room like a shrine. And me? I was Evelyn, the younger kid who loved taking apart computers and dreaming about robots, the one who never quite fit the Harper mold. Our dinner table was less about food and more about performance. Mom would lean forward, her wine glass catching the chandelier's light, and ask, "So, what did we accomplish today?" Nathan always had an answer ready. A perfect LSAT practice score, a mock trial victory, a summer internship with a judge. His words flowed like he'd rehearsed them, and Mom and Dad would nod, their pride practically glowing. When it was my turn, I'd hesitate. At 12, I'd say something like, "I programmed a game where a robot explores a maze." I'd be so proud, my heart racing as I described how I'd taught myself Python from library books. But Mom's smile would tighten, just a fraction. "That's sweet, Evelyn," she'd say, her voice soft but final. "But have you thought about your history paper? Colleges want well-rounded students." Dad would chime in, "Focus on your grades, kiddo." Hobbies are nice, but they don't open doors. Hobbies. That word stung every time. To them, my coding wasn't a skill or a passion. It was a distraction, like collecting stickers or playing soccer. They didn't mean to hurt me, I know that now. They just had a script for success. Ivy League, law school, a corner office, and I wasn't following it. Nathan was their proof the script worked. He was charming, disciplined, the kind of son who made strangers whisper, "That boy's going places." Meanwhile, I was the dreamer, the one who stayed up until midnight wiring circuits for a robot that could follow a line on the floor. My bedroom was my escape, filled with circuit boards and dog-eared programming manuals, a world where I could build things that made sense to me. It wasn't just at home. Darien was a town obsessed with status. At school, kids bragged about their parents' jobs or their own college plans. My friends were nice enough, but they'd raise their eyebrows when I talked about AI. "You want to, make computers think?" my friend Sarah asked once, laughing like I'd said I wanted to live on Mars. "Why not just be a lawyer like Nathan? You're smart enough." Even my teachers, who praised my math scores, would nudge me toward practical paths. "Have you considered economics, Evelyn?" my guidance counselor asked in 9th grade. "It's a solid field for someone with your brain." Nobody saw what I saw. A future where machines could learn, teach, and solve problems we hadn't even imagined. By 15, I was sneaking into online forums, chatting with coders from Seattle to Singapore. I'd post my projects, clunky AI models that could barely recognize shapes, and strangers would reply with feedback, encouragement, and even code snippets to try. It was the first time I felt seen, like my ideas mattered. At home, though, the gap widened. One evening, I was buzzing because I'd built a chatbot that could answer basic history questions, something I thought Dad might appreciate. I showed it to him, my hands shaky with excitement. "Look, it can explain the Battle of Yorktown," I said, clicking through the interface. He watched for maybe 10 seconds before patting my shoulder. "Clever, Evelyn, but don't let this distract you from your AP classes. Nathan's already looking at Yale, you know." My stomach sank. I mumbled something and retreated to my room, vowing to keep my projects to myself. The worst moments came at family gatherings. Every Thanksgiving, aunts and uncles would swarm our dining room, their voices loud with wine and pride. Nathan was the star, fielding questions about his debate wins or his plans for law school. "You must be so proud," my Aunt Linda would say to Mom, glancing at Nathan like he was a trophy. When someone asked about me, Mom's tone would shift, like she was choosing her words carefully. "Evelyn's very creative," she'd say. "She's still figuring things out." Figuring things out. That phrase followed me like a shadow. Nobody asked what I was working on, and I stopped offering. I'd sit there, picking at my turkey, feeling like a guest in my own family. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They did, in their way. They paid for my summer camps, bought me a nice laptop, and even drove me to SAT prep classes. But love doesn't always mean understanding. To them, success looked like Nathan's path. Clear, prestigious, and approved by everyone in our zip code. My path, with its late nights and lines of code, was invisible. Sometimes I wondered if I was wrong to love it so much. Maybe they were right, and I was chasing a fantasy. But then I'd open my laptop, watch my robot roll across the floor, and feel a spark nothing else could give me. That spark kept me going, even when nobody else believed in it. One moment, when I was 16, changed everything. My high school hosted a regional STEM fair, and I entered with an AI program that could grade multiple-choice quizzes faster than any teacher. I'd spent months on it, testing it with old exams I found online. The day of the fair, I set up my booth, nervous but proud. My parents couldn't come. Nathan had a mock trial that day, and they were cheering him on in Hartford. "We'll hear all about it tonight," Mom said, already halfway out the door. I nodded, used to it by then. Alone at my booth, I explained my project to judges, my voice shaking at first, but growing steadier. When they announced the winners, my name echoed through the gym. First place. The head judge, a software engineer from a local startup, pulled me aside. "You've got something special, Evelyn," she said. "This isn't just a project, it's a glimpse of the future." I drove home clutching my certificate, my heart pounding. Maybe this would be the moment they'd see me. But when I walked in, the house was alive with Nathan's victory. "He crushed the prosecution's case," Dad was saying, pouring wine for relatives who'd dropped by. I stood in the doorway, certificate in hand, waiting for a pause. Finally, Mom noticed me. "Oh, Evelyn, how was your science thing?" she asked, distracted. "I won," I said quietly, holding up the paper. "First place." She smiled, but it was rushed. "That's wonderful, sweetie. We'll frame it later. Did you hear about Nathan?" I nodded, my throat tight, and slipped upstairs. That night, lying in bed, I made a promise to myself. I'd build something so big they couldn't ignore it. Not for their approval, but for me. For the girl who believed in robots when nobody else did. Looking back, those years shaped me. The loneliness, the doubt, the quiet rebellion. They forged a strength I didn't know I had. I didn't realize it then, but I was already building the foundation for everything that came next. A foundation nobody saw coming, least of all my family. High school was like walking a tightrope. On one side, I had my dreams, building AI that could teach kids math or help teachers grade papers faster. On the other, I had my family's expectations, heavy as a stack of law school applications. By 16, I'd learned to keep my world separate. At home, I was Evelyn Harper, the quiet daughter who nodded through lectures about college essays and SAT scores. But in my bedroom, with my laptop glowing in the dark, I was someone else. A coder chasing a vision nobody in Darien, Connecticut could see. School wasn't much better. Darien High was a pressure cooker, full of kids gunning for Harvard or Stanford. My classmates were obsessed with GPAs and extracurriculars, the kind that looked good on resumes. I joined the math club, mostly to keep Mom and Dad off my back, but my heart wasn't in it. I'd sneak away to the computer lab during lunch, working on algorithms that could predict quiz answers from patterns in old tests. Once I showed my code to Mr. Daniels, my computer science teacher. His eyes lit up. "This is graduate-level thinking, Evelyn," he said, leaning over my screen. "You should enter a coding competition." For a moment, I felt like someone got it. But then he added, "It'll look great on your college apps." Even he saw my work as a means to an end, not an end in itself. At home, the gap between me and my family grew wider. Mom, with her Yale professorship, would talk about Nathan's latest debate win over dinner, her voice bright with pride. "He's arguing circles around law students already," she'd say, passing the mashed potatoes. Dad, always buried in some historical manuscript, would nod and ask Nathan about his internship at a Hartford law firm. When they turned to me, it was like they were checking a box. "Evelyn, how's that AP English paper coming?" Dad would ask, barely looking up. I'd mumble something vague, knowing they didn't really want details. Once I tried to share. "I made an AI that can summarize books," I said, thinking Mom might care since she taught literature. She raised an eyebrow. "That's creative, honey. But don't let it pull you away from your studies. You need to focus on real skills." Real skills. Like memorizing Shakespeare or writing essays nobody would read after graduation. Nathan wasn't cruel, but he didn't help. He'd breeze through the house, all confidence and charm, tossing out advice like he was my life coach. "You should try debate, Ev," he said one afternoon, sprawled on the couch with a law journal. "It's a better use of your brain than messing with computers." He meant well, I think, but his words cut deep. To him, my passion was a phase, something I'd outgrow when I came to my senses and followed his path. I stopped arguing back. It was easier to let them think what they wanted. The summer before my junior year, I found my lifeline. I'd been scrolling through a coding forum when I stumbled on a post about the Northeast Tech Challenge, a regional competition for high schoolers. The challenge was to build an AI tool that solved a real-world problem. First prize was a $5,000 scholarship and a chance to present to tech companies in Boston. I read the details 3 times, my pulse racing. This was my shot to prove I wasn't just dreaming. I spent weeks preparing, barely sleeping. My project was an AI tutor that could explain algebra step by step, adapting to a student's mistakes. I tested it on my old math homework, tweaking it until it felt alive, like a teacher who never got frustrated. The competition was on a Saturday in New Haven, the same day as Nathan's regional debate finals. I didn't even ask my parents to come. "We'll be cheering for Nathan," Mom said the night before, packing a cooler for their drive. "But you'll do great, sweetie. Tell us about it later." Her smile was kind but distracted, like she was already mentally at Nathan's event. I nodded, used to it by now. The next morning I took a train to New Haven alone, my laptop bag heavy on my shoulder. The venue was a buzzing conference center, packed with kids and their parents. I felt a pang watching other families cheer from the sidelines, but I pushed it down. I didn't need them to believe in me today. I just needed to believe in myself. Setting up my demo, I was a bundle of nerves. My booth was simple, a laptop, a poster, and a shaky smile. But when the judges came by, something shifted. I explained how my AI tutor worked and how it could help struggling students in underfunded schools. Their questions were tough, about scalability, data privacy, and user experience, but I had answers. For the first time, I wasn't just a kid with a hobby. I was a creator, defending my work to people who took it seriously. When they called my name for first place, I almost didn't believe it. "Evelyn Harper, Darien High School," the announcer said, and the room erupted in applause. I walked to the stage, my legs wobbly, clutching a certificate and a check. A judge from an ed tech startup shook my hand. "You've got a future in this, Evelyn," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I should have been over the moon. But on the train home, all I could think about was what awaited for me. The house was quiet when I walked in. Mom and Dad were still at Nathan's event. I left my certificate on the kitchen counter and went to bed. The next morning, over breakfast, Dad noticed it. "What's this?" he asked, picking it up. "I won the Northeast Tech Challenge," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's a big coding competition." Mom glanced over, her coffee mug paused midair. "That's nice, Evelyn. Did you hear Nathan took first in his debate? He's headed to nationals." I nodded, my chest tight. They didn't ask about my project or the judges or what it meant to me. The certificate sat on the counter for a week before it disappeared, probably tucked in a drawer somewhere. That moment solidified something. I wasn't going to keep trying to win their approval. I'd build my future on my terms, even if it meant doing it alone. Senior year was a blur of college applications and family pressure. Mom and Dad pushed for Yale or Princeton, dreaming of me in law school like Nathan. I applied to MIT and Carnegie Mellon instead, schools with top AI programs. When MIT accepted me with a partial scholarship, I was ecstatic. I ran downstairs to tell my parents, waving the letter. Dad read it, his face unreadable. "MIT's fine," he said finally. "But you could have aimed higher. Yale would have set you up for a real career." Mom added, "Computer science is so narrow, Evelyn." "What about a liberal arts degree? It gives you options." Options. They meant their options, not mine. Leaving for MIT that fall was like taking a deep breath after years underwater. Boston was a new world, gritty and alive, nothing like Darien's polished streets. For the first time, I wasn't the odd one out. My classmates spoke my language: machine learning, neural networks, and robotics. Professors noticed my work, not because it looked good on a resume, but because it pushed boundaries. In my freshman year, I built an AI model that predicted student dropout risks based on attendance patterns. My advisor called it groundbreaking and urged me to publish it. I didn't tell my family. What was the point? They'd just ask if I was keeping up with my real classes. But the freedom came with loneliness. Holidays meant going home, where nothing had changed. At Thanksgiving, relatives fawned over Nathan, now at Columbia Law, while I fielded questions like, "Still doing that computer stuff?" My uncle patted my arm once, chuckling. "You'll find your path, Evelyn, maybe tech support or something stable." I smiled tightly, saying nothing. Back in Boston, I threw myself into my work, letting the hum of servers and the clack of keyboards drown out the doubt. MIT was where I started to see it. I wasn't just good at this, I was exceptional, and I was only getting started. Looking back, those high school years were the hardest. The world told me my dreams were small, but I kept them alive in secret. That coding competition, that first taste of victory, it wasn't just a win. It was proof I could trust myself, even when nobody else did. College gave me the space to grow, but it was that spark from New Haven that carried me forward. I didn't know it then, but I was already laying the groundwork for something bigger than I could imagine. Something that would change everything. College was my first taste of freedom, but it wasn't until my sophomore year at MIT that I found my true north. Boston's energy, its mix of old brick buildings and cutting-edge tech hubs, felt like a place where I could finally become myself. I was no longer the girl from Darien who had to hide her coding projects. At MIT, my ideas weren't quirks, they were currency. Still, there was a quiet ache inside me, a longing to build something that mattered, something that could prove I wasn't the failure my family saw. That's when I met Lena Torres, and everything changed. It was a rainy afternoon in my machine learning class. The professor had paired us for a group project, and Lena was my partner. She was a whirlwind, sharp, funny, with a knack for asking questions that cut straight to the core. While most of us were slogging through the assignment, Lena and I finished early, our code running smoothly on the first try. "This is too easy," she said, leaning back in her chair, her dark curls spilling over her hoodie. "Want to make it fun? Let's add a feature." I grinned, already liking her vibe. We spent the next hour tweaking our model to predict not just test scores, but why students might be struggling, things like stress or gaps in prior lessons. By the time we presented it, the professor was scribbling notes, muttering about publishable work. Lena and I just looked at each other, knowing we'd stumbled onto something special. After class, we started grabbing coffee at a cramped cafe near campus, the kind with wobbly tables and burnt espresso. We'd talk for hours, our laptops open, ideas bouncing like sparks. Lena had grown up in Providence, her parents immigrants who'd worked multiple jobs to send her to college. She'd seen firsthand how broken the education system could be: overworked teachers, kids left behind because nobody had time to help. "My little brother almost dropped out of high school," she told me one night, her voice tight. His teachers were great, but they had 30 kids per class. No one could keep up. I nodded, thinking of my AI tutor from the Northeast Tech Challenge. What if we built something that helped teachers? I said. Like AI that personalizes lessons for every kid so no one slips through the cracks. Lena's eyes lit up. That's not just a project, Evelyn. That's a company. That conversation was the seed of LearnSphere. Over the next few weeks, we sketched out a vision. An AI platform that adapted to each student's needs, giving teachers real-time insights to tailor their lessons. We worked in Lena's dorm room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and whiteboards covered in diagrams. By the end of the semester, we had a prototype, a clunky but functional system that could generate custom math quizzes. We tested it with a local high school, and the feedback was electric. This saved me hours, one teacher wrote. I can actually focus on teaching now. Lena and I high-fived so hard my hand stung. It wasn't just about the tech, it was about giving kids a chance, the way I'd wished someone had seen my potential back in Darien. Summer break meant going home, and the contrast was brutal. In Boston, I was a rising star, someone professors emailed about research opportunities. In Darien, I was still the daughter who hadn't figured it out. At a family barbecue, relatives swarmed Nathan, now a second-year law student at Columbia, asking about his clerkship with a federal judge. When they got to me, the questions were softer, tinged with pity. "How's school, Evelyn?" my Aunt Susan asked, her tone suggesting she expected bad news. "It's great," I said, keeping it vague. "I'm working on some tech projects." My uncle chuckled. "Tech's a big field. You'll land something entry-level, right? Maybe at a help desk?" I forced a smile, my stomach twisting. They had no idea I was building a platform that could change education. And I didn't tell them. Their doubt would have crushed the fragile hope I was nurturing. Back at MIT, Lena and I doubled down. Junior year, we entered our prototype in a campus entrepreneurship contest. We spent nights coding in the library, our eyes burning from too much screen time. When we pitched to the judges, venture capitalists and tech founders, I was nervous but steady. I talked about the kids who'd never get a fair shot without tools like ours. Lena broke down the tech, her confidence infectious. We won $10,000 and a meeting with an angel investor. "You two are onto something," the investor said, handing us his card. "Keep going." That money let us file a patent and incorporate LearnSphere as a real company. I remember staring at the paperwork, my name next to Lena's as co-founder. It felt like a promise to myself, one I'd made years ago in my bedroom, surrounded by circuit boards. But starting a company wasn't glamorous. We moved into a tiny apartment in Somerville, the kind with creaky floors and a fridge that hummed too loud. We lived on instant noodles and free coffee from campus events, coding until dawn. To pay rent, I took freelance gigs, building websites for small businesses, while Lena tutored math online. Our first office was a shared desk at a co-working space, wedged between a yoga startup and a guy selling artisanal dog treats. Every milestone felt huge, though. When a Boston middle school signed on as our first paying client, we celebrated with cheap wine and a dance party in our living room. "We're doing this, Evelyn," Lena said, her grin wide. "We're actually doing it." Meanwhile, my family stayed in the dark. Phone calls home were like stepping into a parallel universe. "How's work?" Mom would ask, her voice polite but distant. "Fine," I'd say, not mentioning the investor meetings or the schools begging to pilot our platform. They assumed I was scraping by, maybe writing code for someone else's app. At Christmas, Nathan announced his new job at a top Manhattan law firm. The dining room erupted in cheers, my parents beaming like he'd won a Nobel Prize. Later, Mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. "You know, Evelyn," she said, stirring her tea, "Nathan's friend at his firm needs an IT assistant. I could put in a word." I stared at her, the weight of her assumption pressing down. "I'm good, Mom," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. "I like what I'm doing." She sighed, like I was being stubborn. "We just want you to be secure, honey." That moment hurt more than I expected. I'd spent years proving myself, to teachers, judges, even strangers at MIT. But my own family couldn't see it. Part of me wanted to scream, to tell them about LearnSphere, the schools we'd signed, and the investors circling. But I didn't. Their doubt would have tainted it, turned my dream into something I had to defend. So I kept quiet, letting them think I was drifting. It was easier that way, even if it left a hollow ache in my chest. By senior year, LearnSphere was gaining traction. We hired our first employee, a brilliant coder named Malik who'd been in our algorithms class. A community college in Worcester signed a contract, then a charter school network in Providence. Our platform was saving teachers time and boosting student test scores, data we could point to with pride. Lena and I were invited to speak at an EdTech conference in Chicago, our first taste of industry buzz. Standing on that stage, I felt a rush I'd never known. These people, educators, CEOs, and investors, saw what we'd built. They believed in it. For the first time, I wondered if I could do this for real, not just in secret. But the bigger we got, the more I wrestled with my double life. In Boston, I was Evelyn Harper, co-founder of a startup with a patent and a growing client list. In Darien, I was the daughter who'd chosen a risky major and probably worked at a call center. I started avoiding family events, claiming I was busy with school. When I did go home, I wore old jeans and kept my answers short. "Work's okay," I'd say, dodging follow-ups. My cousin asked once if I was still into computers, and I just nodded, letting her change the subject. Protecting LearnSphere meant protecting myself. I wasn't ready for their judgment, their questions, their inevitable advice to get a real job. Lena noticed my silence about my family. One night, as we debugged code in our apartment, she looked up. "Are you ever going to tell them?" she asked, her tone gentle but pointed. I hesitated, staring at my screen. "Not yet," I said finally. "They wouldn't get it, and I don't need them to." She nodded, like she understood, but her eyes said she worried about me. Lena's parents weren't perfect, but they'd framed our first press clipping, a tiny article in a Boston tech blog, like it was a Pulitzer. My parents didn't even know LearnSphere existed. Graduation came, and I walked across the MIT stage, my heart pounding with pride. Lena was there, cheering louder than anyone. My parents came too, but their congratulations felt perfunctory. "We're proud of you," Dad said, his smile stiff. "Now you can start looking for something stable." I didn't bother correcting him. I was already building something bigger than they could imagine. As I packed up my dorm, I looked at the LearnSphere logo on my laptop, a simple globe with lines of code curling around it. This was my path, and I was just getting started. The world didn't know it yet, but I was ready to change education, and I'd do it my way, whether my family saw it or not. After graduation, Boston became my home in a way Darien never was. The city's pulse, its honking cabs, its cobblestone streets, its tech scene humming with possibility, matched the rhythm of my ambition. LearnSphere wasn't just a project anymore. It was a living, breathing thing, growing faster than Lena and I could have dreamed. By the time I turned 24, our AI platform was in 100 schools, helping thousands of kids learn better, faster, and smarter. In the EdTech world, we were starting to turn heads. But back in Connecticut, my family still saw me as the kid who'd picked the wrong major. That disconnect was my choice, my shield. And sometimes, it felt heavier than I could carry. Our first big break came a few months after MIT. A school district in Philadelphia signed a contract to roll out LearnSphere across 20 campuses. Lena and I were in our Somerville apartment when the email landed, staring at the screen like it might vanish. "This is real," Lena said, her voice shaky with awe. "Like, really real." We screamed, hugged, and opened a bottle of cheap sparkling wine that tasted like victory. That contract brought in enough revenue to move LearnSphere out of our co-working space and into a proper office, a small sunlit loft in Boston's Seaport district. We hung our first press clipping on the wall, a glowing review from an EdTech blog. Malik, our first hire, joked that we needed a bigger frame for our egos. But it wasn't ego driving us. It was the emails from teachers saying our platform helped a shy kid pass algebra or caught a student struggle before it became a crisis. That's what kept me up at night, coding until my fingers ached. Growth brought new challenges. We hired a team, 5 developers, a designer, a marketing whiz named Priya, who could pitch LearnSphere like it was her own baby. Our platform evolved, adding features like real-time parent updates and speech-to-text for kids with disabilities. By the next spring, we'd raised $3 million from a venture capital firm in Cambridge. The investor meeting was surreal, all sleek conference tables and executives twice our age. Lena handled the numbers, I broke down the tech, and together we painted a picture of a future where every classroom had LearnSphere. When they wrote us the check, I felt a rush. Not just pride, but power. We were building something that mattered, and the world was starting to notice. The industry buzz grew louder. A tech magazine ran a feature on EdTech's rising stars, with a photo of Lena smiling confidently and me standing slightly behind, my face half hidden by shadow. I'd insisted on that. "Why stay in the background?" Lena asked after the shoot, her brow furrowed. "You're half this company, Evelyn." I shrugged, dodging the question. The truth was, I wasn't ready for the spotlight. Not because I doubted myself, but because I didn't trust what it would bring. Recognition meant questions, and questions meant my family finding out. I could already hear Mom's voice, turning my success into something she'd always known I'd achieve, or Dad suggesting I'd gotten lucky. I wanted LearnSphere to be mine, untouched by their lens, for as long as I could keep it that way. So I became a ghost in my own story. At conferences, I let Lena take the stage while I worked the room, shaking hands with superintendents and CEOs. Industry blogs called me the elusive co-founder, spinning my low profile into a mystique that only boosted LearnSphere's allure. It worked. By the time I was 26, we had 200 clients, school districts, private academies, even a university pilot. Our valuation hit $50 million, a number that made my head spin. I moved into a modest condo near the Charles River, with big windows and a view of sailboats gliding at dusk. I paid off my student loans, bought a used car, and kept my life simple. When I visited Darien, I drove that car, wore plain sweaters, and let my family assume I was scraping by. It was easier than explaining a truth they wouldn't believe. Holidays were the hardest. At a family wedding that summer, relatives swarmed Nathan, now a hotshot lawyer at his Manhattan firm, congratulating him on a big case he'd won. I stood by the dessert table, dodging questions about my job. "Still in Boston?" my cousin Mark asked, his tone polite but pitying. "Yeah, working in tech," I said, sipping my drink. He nodded, like that explained everything. "Good for you. Tech's got lots of entry-level spots." I didn't correct him. Later, Mom cornered me by the dance floor. "Evelyn, you look tired," she said, her eyes scanning my face. "Are you managing okay? Nathan knows someone at a tech support company if you need a better position." My jaw tightened. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "Really?" She patted my arm, unconvinced, and moved on to brag about Nathan's latest promotion. I left early, the ache in my chest heavier than ever. Keeping my world separate took a toll. In Boston, I was a leader, signing contracts, mentoring my team, speaking at panels when I couldn't avoid it. In Darien, I was the daughter who'd settled for less. The dissonance gnawed at me, especially late at night when the city was quiet. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Patel, who helped me untangle the mess. "Why not tell them?" she asked during one session, her voice calm but direct. "You've built something extraordinary. What's holding you back?" I stared at the floor, searching for words. "I don't want their approval," I said finally. "Not if it means they rewrite my story to fit their version of success. I need this to be mine first." She nodded, but her eyes said she knew it wasn't that simple. I was protecting myself, yes, but I was also hiding from the pain of their rejection. LearnSphere kept climbing. A major school district in Chicago signed on, then another in Seattle. We raised another $10 million, hired 20 more people, and upgraded our office to a sleek space with glass walls and a ping-pong table nobody used. Studies started showing our impact. Students using LearnSphere scored 15% higher on standardized tests, and teacher retention improved in our partner schools. At an EdTech summit, a superintendent hugged me, tears in her eyes, because our platform had helped her district close an achievement gap. Moments like that were my fuel, proof that my work wasn't just code on a screen, it was changing lives. But the bigger we got, the harder it was to stay invisible. A national news outlet wanted to profile us, and I negotiated to keep my name vague, Evelyn, co-founder, with no photo. Lena thought I was crazy. "You're not a spy, Evelyn," she said, half laughing, half frustrated. "Why act like one?" I couldn't explain it fully, not even to her. It wasn't just about my family. It was about control, about owning my narrative until I was ready to share it. In my heart, I knew that day was coming, but I wasn't there yet. I needed LearnSphere to be undeniable, a force so big no one could dismiss it as luck or a fluke. My family's assumptions grew more absurd. At Thanksgiving, Nathan teased me about my cubicle life, assuming I was stuck in some dead-end coding job. "You should visit me in New York," he said, all big brother generosity. "I can introduce you to some tech recruiters." I laughed it off, but it stung. They didn't know I was negotiating a deal with a state education board, or that my net worth, on paper, was climbing into the millions. I let them believe their version of me because the truth felt too fragile to share. But every time I hung up the phone or drove back to Boston, I felt a little more alone. One evening, as I walked along the Charles River, the city lights reflecting on the water, I stopped to breathe. I was 27, running a company valued at $100 million, with a team that believed in me and a mission that kept me grounded. I'd built this from nothing, against every doubt I'd ever faced. But the weight of my secret was starting to crack something inside me. I didn't want to hide forever. I just didn't know how to step into the light without losing the part of me I'd fought so hard to protect. Looking back, those years were a balancing act. I was proud of LearnSphere, of the lives we were touching, but I was also guarding a wound that hadn't healed. Every contract, every headline, every late-night coding session was a step toward something bigger, not just a company, but a version of myself I could believe in. I didn't know it then, but the universe was about to force my hand, ready or not. My two worlds were on a collision course, and there was no turning back. By the time I hit 28, LearnSphere wasn't just a company, it was a movement. Our AI platform was in 300 schools across the country, from rural towns in Montana to bustling districts in Los Angeles. Teachers sent us thank you notes, kids sent drawings of our logo, and studies showed our platform boosted graduation rates in underfunded schools. In Boston, our office hummed with energy, a team of 40 now, all believing in the mission Lena and I had started in a dorm room. I'd walk through the open-plan space, past coders hunched over laptops and Priya pitching to investors on Zoom, and feel a quiet pride. This was my world, built from scratch. But in Darien, I was still the daughter who'd taken a wrong turn, and the weight of that lie was starting to crack my carefully built walls. The first whisper of change came on a crisp morning in our Seaport office. I was reviewing user data when Lena burst in, holding her phone like it was a live grenade. "Evelyn, you need to see this," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and nerves. She showed me an email from Pinnacle Education, a giant in the edtech space, known for snapping up startups like ours. "They want to talk," Lena said. "Not just talk, acquire. They're throwing around numbers with a lot of zeros." I read the email twice, my heart pounding. Pinnacle was offering $200 million to buy LearnSphere, with terms that would keep Lena and me on board for 3 years. It was the kind of deal that could cement our legacy or change everything we'd built. "What do we do?" Lena asked, searching my face. "We listen," I said, trying to sound calm. "But we don't jump." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Pinnacle sent a team to Boston, all polished suits and big promises. Lena and I sat across from them in a glass-walled conference room, laying out LearnSphere's impact, our data, our growth, our vision. They nodded, took notes, and upped their offer to $250 million. The number was dizzying, a figure that could transform lives, fund new projects, secure our team's future. But it also meant stepping out of the shadows. An acquisition this big would make headlines, and my name, Evelyn Harper, co-founder, would be everywhere. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, not when my family still thought I was coding apps for pocket change. I leaned on Dr. Patel, my therapist, to sort through the noise. "What's scaring you about this deal?" she asked during a session, her voice steady as always. I fidgeted with my coffee mug, staring out her window at the Boston skyline. "It's not the deal," I admitted. "It's what comes after. If we sell, everyone will know. My parents, Nathan, all of them. They'll act like they always believed in me, or worse, like I owe them for pushing me. I don't want their version of my story." Dr. Patel nodded, her eyes kind but firm. "You've spent years protecting your truth, Evelyn. But hiding it comes at a cost. What would it feel like to own it fully, no matter what they say?" I didn't have an answer, but her words stuck with me, like a song I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, LearnSphere's profile kept rising. A national education conference invited us to keynote, and Lena insisted I share the stage. "You can't ghost this one, Evelyn," she said, half teasing. I agreed, but only if they used my first name and a blurry photo in the program. The speech went viral in edtech circles, clips of me talking about equity in education racking up views online. Industry blogs dubbed me LearnSphere's Mystery Mind, which Lena found hilarious. "You're like Batman," she joked, tossing a stress ball at me, "all brooding and secretive." I laughed, but inside I was wrestling with the inevitable. The bigger we got, the harder it was to stay invisible. And part of me, a small, stubborn part, wanted to be seen. Life had other plans to speed that up. One Sunday afternoon, as I was crunching numbers for our next investor call, my phone rang. It was Mom, her voice bright with news. "Evelyn, you'll never guess," she said, barely pausing for breath. "Nathan's engaged. He proposed to Abigail last night, and they're planning a big engagement dinner in Manhattan next month. You have to come. It's at the Laurel, that new place everyone's talking about." I smiled, genuinely happy for Nathan. "That's amazing, Mom. I'll be there." But her tone shifted, like it always did when she talked about me. "It's a fancy event, Evelyn. Maybe we can shop for something nice? Your usual clothes are so casual." I bit my lip, glancing at my tailored blazer, a far cry from the casual she imagined. "I'll handle it, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "Tell me about Abigail. What does she do?" "Oh, she's wonderful," Mom gushed. "She's a director at some big education company, Pinnacle something, very impressive, on the fast track to VP. Nathan says she's brilliant." My stomach dropped. Pinnacle Education, the company circling LearnSphere. I kept my tone light, but my mind was racing. "What's her last name?" I asked, as if it was just curiosity. "Reynolds," Mom said. "Abigail Reynolds. Why?" "Just wondering," I lied, my heart thudding. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and searched LinkedIn. There she was. Abigail Reynolds, Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Pinnacle Education. Her profile photo showed a poised woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile. She was leading the team negotiating our deal, and in a few weeks, I'd be sitting across from her at Nathan's engagement dinner, where everyone thought I was a struggling coder. The coincidence felt like a cosmic joke. I called Lena immediately, pacing my condo. "You're kidding," she said when I explained. "Your brother's fiancé is the one trying to buy us out? That's next-level drama." I laughed, but it was hollow. "What if she figures out who I am?" I asked. "The deal's still confidential, but if she connects the dots..." Lena cut me off. "Then she'll know you're a genius who built a $250 million company. Evelyn, maybe this is the push you need. You can't hide forever." I didn't argue, but I wasn't ready to agree either. The idea of my worlds colliding, at a fancy Manhattan restaurant no less, made my chest tight. I'd spent years keeping them separate. Now the universe was forcing my hand. The weeks leading up to the dinner were a blur of stress. Pinnacle's team pushed for more meetings, refining their offer. Lena and I debated late into the night, take the deal and scale faster or stay independent and keep control. I leaned toward selling, but only if we could protect LearnSphere's mission. Meanwhile, my family's calls grew relentless. Mom texted about dress codes, and Dad left a voicemail urging me to bring something impressive to share with Abigail's parents, who were highly accomplished. The worst came a week before the dinner, when Mom called with what she called a delicate matter. "Evelyn," she began, her voice all lawyerly caution, "we were talking with the Reynolds family, and Nathan mentioned you're between jobs? Abigail's dad knows someone at a software company hiring junior developers. Isn't that exciting?" My breath caught, anger flaring. "I'm not between jobs, Mom," I said, sharper than I meant. "I have a career." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "We're just trying to help, honey. Opportunities like this don't come often." I hung up, my hands shaking. Between jobs, junior developer. They didn't just misunderstand me. They'd rewritten my life to fit their narrative. I called my old friend Claire, who'd moved to Boston after college and knew the truth about LearnSphere. Over wine at a cozy Cambridge bar, I vented. "They think I need a pity job," I said, my voice breaking, "while I'm negotiating a $250 million deal with Nathan's fiancée." Claire laughed, then squeezed my hand. "Evelyn, you're living a double life worthy of a movie. What's the plan for this dinner? Show up in a power suit and drop the mic or keep playing the underdog?" I sighed, swirling my glass. "I don't know. I just want to be myself. No games, no big reveal. If they find out, fine. But I'm done performing for them." The night before the dinner, Pinnacle sent their final offer. $250 million, with a clause ensuring LearnSphere's core features stayed intact. Lena and I read it in silence, the weight of it settling over us. "This is it," she said softly. "We could change the game with this." I nodded, my mind already on Manhattan. Whatever happened tomorrow, I knew one thing. I wasn't the girl who'd left Darien, desperate for approval. I'd built something real, something mine. And no one, not my parents, not Nathan, not even Abigail, could take that away. As I picked out a simple navy dress for the dinner, I felt a strange calm. The secret I'd carried for years was about to unravel, whether I wanted it to or not. I wasn't sure what would happen when my family saw the truth, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I'd spent too long proving myself to myself. Now, it was time to face whatever came next. The Laurel was everything you'd expect from a Manhattan hotspot. Gleaming marble floors, chandeliers dripping with crystal, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city's glittering skyline. I stepped into the restaurant, my navy dress hugging my frame, simple but sharp, like I belonged. My heart was another story, pounding like I was about to pitch to a room full of investors. Tonight wasn't just Nathan's engagement dinner. It was the night my carefully guarded worlds, Boston and Darien, success and secrecy, might crash into each other. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I was done running from the truth. The hostess led me to a private dining room, its long table set with crisp linens and flickering candles. My family was already there, a buzz of familiar voices. Dad stood by a bar cart, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man I guessed was Abigail's father. Mom fussed with name cards, orchestrating the seating like a chess game. Nathan spotted me first, his lawyer's grin lighting up. "Ev, you made it," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. His ease, his certainty of his place in the world, was as familiar as ever. "Come meet Abigail." He steered me toward a woman by the window, tall and poised in an emerald green dress, her blonde hair swept into a sleek bun. I recognized her from her LinkedIn photo, though in person, Abigail Reynolds had a warmth that softened her executive edge. "It's so great to meet you, Evelyn," she said, her handshake firm but kind. "Nathan's told me all about you." I wondered what that meant, but I smiled back. "Congratulations," I said. "I'm thrilled for you both." Mom appeared at my side, her eyes scanning my outfit with a flicker of surprise, like she'd expected jeans and a hoodie. "Evelyn, you clean up nicely," she said, her tone a mix of approval and caution. "We've seated you next to Aunt Carolyn. You two always chat well." The subtext was clear. I was safely tucked away from the important guests. I nodded, used to it, and took my place as the room filled with relatives and Abigail's family, all polished and brimming with small talk. The air smelled of roasted herbs and expensive wine, but beneath my calm exterior, I was bracing for something I couldn't name. Dinner began with a clink of champagne flutes. Dad raised his glass first, his voice warm with pride. "To Nathan, who's never stopped making us proud," he said, his gaze fixed on my brother. "And to Abigail, a remarkable woman who's his equal in every way. Welcome to the family." Mom followed, her toast a polished ode to Nathan's journey from debate star to legal powerhouse, ending with a nod to Abigail's brilliant career. As glasses clinked, I caught Abigail glancing my way, her expression curious, like she was piecing together a puzzle. I looked down at my plate, my pulse quickening. Did she know? Had she connected the dots? The first course, seared scallops on a bed of risotto, arrived, and conversation swirled around me. Aunt Carolyn asked about my life in Boston, her tone gentle, like she was inquiring about a lost cause. "I'm in education technology," I said, keeping it vague. "Data work, mostly." She nodded, her smile sympathetic. "That sounds steady. Is there room to grow in that?" Before I could answer, my uncle leaned in from across the table. "Evelyn, Nathan mentioned you might be looking for something new. Abigail's dad has a contact at a tech firm, entry level, but a good start." My fork paused midair. I took a slow breath, forcing a smile. "I'm happy where I am," I said, my voice steady but firm. Dad overheard, his brow furrowing. "No need to be proud, Evelyn," he said, his tone paternal. "We all start somewhere. A connection like that could open doors." I opened my mouth to respond, but Abigail's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and clear. "Evelyn," she said, her eyes locked on mine, "is your last name Harper?" The room stilled, forks hovering, eyes turning. Nathan laughed, confused. "Yeah, she's my sister. Why?" Abigail set down her glass, her expression shifting from curiosity to realization. "You're Evelyn Harper," she said almost to herself, "from LearnSphere." My heart stopped. The air felt thick, every gaze pinning me to my seat. I nodded, barely breathing. "Yes," I said simply. Abigail's eyes widened, her professional poise giving way to awe. "You're the founder," she said, her voice carrying across the silent table. "The co-founder of LearnSphere. The AI platform is transforming education, the one my company's been negotiating to acquire for $250 million. A gasp rippled through the room. Nathan's jaw dropped, his fork clattering against his plate. Mom's hand froze on her necklace, her face pale. Dad's wine glasses tilted, nearly spilling. "Is this true?" Dad asked, his voice faint, like he couldn't trust his ears. I met his gaze, calm but unyielding. "Yes," I said. "Lena Torres and I started LearnSphere 6 years ago. We're in over 300 schools now with a team of 40, and we're finalizing the deal with Pinnacle next week." The silence was deafening, broken only by Abigail's voice, now tinged with admiration. "Your platform's a game changer," she said, oblivious to the shock around her. "We ran a pilot in Chicago, and test scores jumped 20%. The teacher dashboard, it's intuitive, revolutionary. We've been chasing a solution like yours for years, but you and Lena built it first. That's why we're paying a premium." She paused, a sheepish smile crossing her face. "I had no idea you were Nathan's sister. Your profile just says Evelyn, co-founder, no photo. Our teams handled the talks." Nathan stared at me, his face a mix of disbelief and something else. Hurt, maybe. "You're running a company worth $250 million?" he asked, his voice raw. "And you never said anything?" Mom's eyes glistened, her voice trembling. "Evelyn, why would you hide this? We're your family." Before I could answer, Abigail continued, her enthusiasm unstoppable. "She's not just running it," she said. "She's the brains behind it. Industry folks call her the ghost genius because she stays out of the spotlight, but everyone knows LearnSphere's tech is light years ahead." The room erupted in murmurs. Relatives who'd pitied me an hour ago now leaned forward, eyes wide. My cousin Mark stammered, "You're a millionaire?" Mom repeated, "Why didn't you tell us?" her voice cracking. Dad just stared, his historian's mind clearly rewriting years of assumptions. I took a deep breath, the weight of their shock settling over me. "I tried," I said quietly, my voice steady but laced with years of hurt. "When I was younger, I showed you my projects, my ideas. You called them distractions, not real work. After a while, it was easier to stop sharing. I needed to build this for me, not for your approval." The words hung in the air, raw and true. Mom's face crumpled, like she was seeing me for the first time. Nathan shook his head, still processing. "Ev, I had no idea," he said, almost a whisper. Dad cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. We thought you were struggling." I nodded, not softening the truth. "You thought what you wanted to think," I said. "But I wasn't struggling. I was building the rest of the dinner past in a haze. Relatives peppered me with questions about LearnSphere, the acquisition, and my life in Boston. My Aunt Carolyn, who'd asked about room to grow in my job, now wanted investment tips. Mom kept saying, 'I always knew you were special,' her words ringing hollow against years of dismissal. Dad claimed he'd told colleagues about my tech potential, a revisionist history I didn't bother correcting. Nathan stayed quiet, his eyes darting to me like he was meeting a stranger. Through it all, I stayed composed, answering politely but firmly, no longer the girl who'd craved their validation. As plates were cleared, Abigail pulled me aside by the bar, her face apologetic. "I'm so sorry if I put you on the spot," she said, her voice low. "I was just stunned. You're kind of a legend at Pinnacle." I smiled, genuine warmth breaking through. "It's okay," I said. "It was time." She nodded, her eyes understanding more than I expected. "For what it's worth, your work's incredible, and I'm not just saying that as your future sister-in-law." We laughed, a small release in the tension. As I said goodbye, Mom grabbed my hand, her grip tight. "We need to talk, Evelyn," she said, her voice urgent. "Really talk." I nodded, knowing it was coming but no longer dreading it. "We will," I said, and meant it. Walking to my car, the Manhattan lights blurring in the night, I felt lighter, like I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. The secret was out, messy and raw, but it was mine to own now. Whatever came next, awkward family talks, Nathan's questions, the acquisition's fallout, I'd face it standing tall. I'd built LearnSphere, changed lives, and found my worth. No one could rewrite that. Driving back to Boston, my phone lit up with texts. Mom, wanting brunch. Nathan asked why I'd kept him in the dark. Relatives, suddenly proud of my tech savvy. I let them sit, unanswered for now. The road stretched ahead, dark but open, and for the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. I was Evelyn Harper, founder, dreamer, doer, and I was ready for what came next. The morning after Nathan's engagement dinner, my phone was a battlefield. Texts poured in, a mix of awe and awkwardness from relatives who'd spent years pitying me. Mom wanted brunch, her message urgent but vague. Nathan sent a single line. "We need to talk, Ev." Even cousins I hadn't seen in years chimed in, suddenly curious about my tech thing. I sat on my Boston condo's balcony, the Charles River sparkling below, and let the messages pile up. The secret I'd guarded for a decade was out, raw and messy, like a wound finally exposed to air. I wasn't sure what healing looked like, but I knew it started with me. Not their approval, not their apologies, just me. The Pinnacle acquisition closed a week later, a quiet moment that felt louder than any headline. Lena and I signed the papers in our Seaport office, surrounded by our team, who cheered like we'd won a championship. The $250 million deal made us centimillionaires, but the real victory was seeing LearnSphere's mission secured. Pinnacle promised to keep our platform's core intact, expanding it to schools worldwide. As we popped champagne, Lena pulled me into a hug. "We did it, Evelyn," she whispered. "You did it." I smiled, my throat tight. This wasn't just a company. It was proof I'd trusted myself when no one else had. That night, I stood by my office window, Boston's skyline aglow, and felt a weight lift. The ghost genius was stepping into the light, and it felt good. But light brings shadows. The press release went out, my full name and photo alongside Lena's. No more hiding. EdTech blogs called us visionaries, and a national outlet ran a profile titled "The Quiet Force Behind LearnSphere." My inbox filled with interview requests, speaking gigs, and even a TEDx invite. In Boston, I was a star, my team toasting me at happy hours, strangers emailing to say our platform had changed their kid's life. In Darien, though, the fallout was trickier. Mom called daily, her voice a mix of pride and confusion. "We're reading about you everywhere," she said once, almost accusingly. "Why didn't you let us in?" I didn't have an easy answer, but I agreed to brunch at a quiet cafe in Greenwich, a neutral ground for the conversation we couldn't avoid. The cafe smelled of fresh scones and coffee, its patio shaded by oaks. Mom and Dad sat across from me, dressed like they were meeting a dignitary, not their daughter. Dad's hands fidgeted with his napkin, a rare crack in his historian's composure. Mom spoke first, her voice soft but strained. "Evelyn, we're so proud," she said, her eyes searching mine. "But we're hurt too. You shut us out of something so big." I took a slow sip of my latte, choosing my words. "I didn't shut you out," I said. "I tried to share, years ago, my projects, my dreams. You saw them as childish, not serious. I stopped trying because it hurt too much to be dismissed." Dad's face tightened, like I'd struck a nerve. "We wanted the best for you," he said. "We thought law or academia was a surer path. We didn't know this was possible." I nodded, the ache of their misunderstanding still raw. "You didn't ask," I said gently. "You assumed I was failing because my path didn't look like Nathan's. But I wasn't failing. I was building something real." Mom's eyes welled up, her hand reaching for mine. "We misjudged you," she said, her voice breaking. "We see that now." Dad cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "I told colleagues you had potential," he said, then paused, catching himself. "But I didn't listen. I'm sorry, Evelyn." The apology, small as it was, landed like a stone in still water. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. We parted with a tentative plan for dinner the next month, a fragile bridge to something new. Nathan was harder. He showed up at my condo unannounced one evening, a bottle of Merlot in hand, his lawyer's polish replaced by something raw. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard. I let him in, my sleek living room a stark contrast to the struggling sister he'd imagined. We sat by the windows, the city lights stretching below, and sipped wine in silence for a moment. "I'm an idiot," he said finally, his eyes on his glass. "I bought the whole story. You floundering, me succeeding. I never asked who you really were." His honesty caught me off guard, disarming years of resentment. "You were busy being the golden boy," I said, half teasing, half true. He winced but nodded. "Yeah, I was. It was easy to lean into that. I'm sorry, Ev, for all of it." We talked late into the night, peeling back layers we'd never touched. He asked about LearnSphere, not just the headlines, but the grind, the sleepless nights, the doubts, the triumphs. I asked about his law career, finding myself curious about the cases he fought, the pressure he carried. For the first time, we weren't rivals or roles in our parents' script. We were just siblings, flawed and trying. As he left, he hugged me, longer than usual. Abigail's obsessed with you, by the way, he said, a grin breaking through. She says you're her hero. I laughed, the warmth of it lingering. Nathan and I weren't fixed, but we were starting, and that was enough. Abigail became an unexpected ally. As Pinnacle's integration lead, she worked closely with me, her sharp mind and dry humor a perfect match for our team. Over coffee breaks, we bonded beyond the deal, swapping stories about family expectations. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, she admitted once, stirring her latte. They didn't get my career until I made VP. Sound familiar? I nodded, grateful for her perspective. She nudged my parents, too, explaining edtech in terms they could grasp, gently correcting their old habits. At a family dinner, when Dad started offering unsolicited business advice, Abigail cut in with, "Evelyn's already outpacing most CEOs, Henry. Maybe ask her for tips." Mom laughed, and Dad, to my surprise, listened. My parents were learning, slowly. Mom visited our Boston office, her eyes wide as she watched my team demo LearnSphere's latest features. "This is yours," she said, almost to herself, touching the logo on a monitor. "I'm so proud." Her voice cracked, and I hugged her, feeling a warmth I hadn't in years. Dad started emailing me articles about AI, his way of connecting, though half were outdated. Their efforts weren't seamless. Mom still fretted about my diet, and Dad tried to strategize my career, but they were real. Our weekly calls shifted from surface chatter to actual conversations, sometimes clumsy, sometimes deep. Healing wasn't a straight line, but we were walking it together. The biggest change was in me. The acquisition gave me freedom, financial, sure, but also emotional. I kept seeing Dr. Patel working through the walls I'd built to protect myself. "You don't need them anymore," she said one session, her voice gentle. "Not in the same way. What does it feel like to let them go?" I started to find out. I joined a women's tech network, sharing my story with founders who'd faced their own doubts. I reconnected with Claire, my old friend, hosting game nights that filled my condo with laughter. I even started dating, cautiously letting someone in without fear of losing myself. One of my greatest joys was giving back. I launched a mentorship program for high school girls in STEM, hosting monthly workshops in Boston. A 16-year-old named Maya told me, "My parents think coding's a waste of time. They want me to be a nurse." I saw myself in her, the spark I'd almost lost. "What do you want?" I asked. "To build apps that help people," she said, her eyes fierce. I handed her a list of resources, camps, forums, and scholarships. "Build it," I said. "Find your people, even if they're not family, and keep the door open for them to catch up." She hugged me, and I felt a piece of my younger self heal. A few months after the dinner, I hosted Nathan, Abigail, and my parents for dinner at my condo. The table was set with takeout pizza, my choice, a nod to LearnSphere's early days. Conversation flowed, from Abigail's wedding plans to Nathan's latest case to Mom's new book club obsession. Dad asked about LearnSphere's global rollout, his questions thoughtful, not prescriptive. As we laughed over burnt garlic bread, I realized this was what I'd wanted. Not their awe, but their presence, seeing me as I was. Later, Abigail raised her glass. "To Evelyn," she said, her smile warm, "for building something incredible and for letting us in." Everyone clinked, and I felt a lump in my throat. Not because they'd finally seen me, but because I'd learned to see myself. Now, as I sit in my office, the Charles River glittering outside, I'm struck by how far I've come. LearnSphere's in schools across 4 continents, and I lead Pinnacle's innovation arm, shaping the future of education. My family's part of my life, not perfect but growing, our bonds stronger for the cracks we've mended. Nathan and I trade texts about work and life, equals at last. Abigail's become a friend, her insights grounding me. Mom and Dad are proud, not just of my success, but of me, the dreamer they're finally learning to know. The real victory, though, is quieter. I don't need anyone's validation anymore. Not my parents, not Nathan's, not the world's. I found it in the late nights coding, the kids whose futures we've changed, and the woman I've become. Success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. I did that, against every doubt, every dismissal. And I'm still doing it every day. If this story hits home, if you've ever had to believe in yourself when no one else did, hold on to that spark. It's yours, no matter who sees it. Share your own journey, the moments you kept going despite the noise. And if you know someone chasing a dream others don't get, pass this on. Tell them to keep building, keep trusting, keep shining. Because the truest success isn't about who cheers you on. It's about knowing, deep down, that you've built something real, something yours. That's what I've learned. That's what I'll carry forward, always.